when I do make mistakes, I do appreciate people pointing them out to me. I really do. I'm serious. I read an article when I first started teaching. This was many years ago. The woman who was kind of my mentor, Mary Zarowski, she gave me a bunch of articles on how to be a better teacher. And one of them said, occasionally make mistakes in class on purpose just to see if the class is paying attention. And in all seriousness, not trying to be funny, I've never had that problem. I make enough mistakes on my own. And if you see them, that's good. All right, and you can point them out to me. All right, the next thing that we want to put in then, so we put in our background, which is our first component. We put in our logo, which was our second component. We put in our kind of our text, or whatever we called it, our intro, I guess, which was our third component. So we've got 3 of 10 done. So the next one is 1, 2, 3 is our counter. All right, and this is a good news, bad news situation. The bad news is that in order to do a counter, we have to go and we have to bring in JavaScript, because that brings in interactivity into our web page. The good news is it's already been written for us, so we just have to plop it in. Okay? So like I said, good news, bad news type of thing. What I did, and you don't have to do this, but I went out and went to Google and typed in Rendro Countdown. And doing that, typing in Rendro Countdown like that, you'll notice that the first thing that comes up on here is GitHub. What this means in English, if you've never seen this before, someone has gone in and used JavaScript and really jQuery, and we're going to talk about this in just a minute, but they've already created this for us, and they posted it out here. All right? To many people, okay, your test yesterday was for you to start creating what? Your portfolio, correct? What many people do for parts of their portfolio is they post stuff out on GitHub because it's free and it gives other people a chance to go out and see things that they've done. Now, and I'm not trying to be funny here, if you're ever going to do that, please don't grab everything else that someone else has done, put it out on GitHub and put your name on it. Unfortunately, people do things like that once in a while. All right, that's a real bad way to get, or a real easy way to get a bad reputation, and I don't know if there have been any legal ramifications or not. All right, but let's say that Valerie says, you know, I could think of a totally different way to do this counter. That's okay. Then she can make her own version and then submit that out there. It's just another way that you can get your name known. All right, so what this gentleman has said is, in order to be able to use this counter, there's 2 things that you have to do. We've already got these, but you have to include these 2 files. Now, if you can't read them, don't worry about it. The first one says, I want a version of jQuery. jQuery is something that we will talk about a little bit at the very end of the JavaScript section. All right, if you can imagine, again, just saying this, no humor intended or anything, but if you could imagine that JavaScript is a human being, okay? All right, then jQuery, which is a JavaScript library, is that human being on steroids times about 1,000. Because what jQuery is it's a JavaScript library with about 10,000 lines in it of code that have been pre-written for you. Each one of those lines of code is in a different function. You can imagine that functions, since it's called a library, are like different books in a library. And rather than you taking out a book from the library, it's more like an electronic library where you can grab a copy of it and do whatever you need to do with it. That's what we'll be doing. All right? So you need to both add this, and again, you've got it already, which is the newest version of jQuery. We're not going to talk about what all that means now. And this, because this is basically that, you know, the code that the author of this has created. Now, and it says, and you have to initialize your plugin. All right? And it says function your container.countdown, etc. date. Well, if you look at what we've got, what I had you copy, you've got that file. There's the jQuery file. And we've got this. Now, this is one time I did change what was in the book, because what he has here is he has 2087. I don't think, you know, You're talking about something that's not going to come up for what, like 71 years? Okay. I know I won't be here then. Probably some of you will be here then, but I won't. All right, unless I make it to about 130. All right, which could happen, but probably won't happen. All right. So I did change that, just so you know. That's been changed. All right. So why is that important? Well, now we've got to come down into counter. And guess what? It's going to, just like the intro was just the same as the logo, the counter is pretty much going to be the same as the intro. So again, I'm going to copy the guts out of here, copy it to the clipboard, come back into here, and paste it in. I don't want a paragraph in here now, so I'm going to remove that paragraph. But literally, all I have to put in here is a div that says class equal countdown. That's it. So this is our next section. It looks exactly the same as the one we just did with the intro. Exactly the same, except we grabbed where we had that paragraph and we replaced it with this line that you see in gray. All right, let me save this, and if you look up on the screen here, it's very hard to see, but we do have the countdown working right there. So we've got our 1, 2, 3, fourth component out of 10 is now in there. All right. So what do we have to do to make that visible? What do we have to change? Our font, our CSS. Okay. So again, we're going to come in and we're going to make some changes to the CSS. Notice it's class equal countdown. Everybody see this in yellow here? Class equal countdown. So we're going to go to our CSS, and now we don't want to start, since it's a class, it starts with a period. Okay? And it's inside of, it's inside of a div called counter, and it's a class called countdown. All right? And again, we want to center it. Again, we want to make it white. And again, this is all, if you look at this later and, let's say Amin looks at this and says, what would look better than white would be this really cool light green color. All right, then that's something that you should try. Okay? That's not a problem. Now, please look up on the screen here. Notice that these two things right here, right there in gray and right there in gray, they're the same. So sometimes people think, oh, they should be combined. They're the same. No. This is one section of our page. This is another section of our page. It's better sometimes to repeat things like we're doing right there. All right? You don't have to do this, but notice that if I go and run it now, there it is. It's white so you can read it better, but it still is very small. So we're going to come in and we're going to change that next. So I'm going to go back into here, and not only are we going to have the color white, etc., but we're also going to add in here our font family. We're not going to use the same one we just had, that just another hand. We're going to use the other one that we added, which is called Amatic SC. And again, cursive. And we want to make it bigger because that was very hard to read. So we're going to have our font size, and this we're going to make, this is the most important part of our page because it's the countdown. So we're going to make that 3 times its regular size. All right, so put all that in if you would, please. And notice after you do, if I go and run it again, well, that's much better. That's much more visible. And we now have the first 1, 2, 3, 4 components. Question? Okay, then we'll take a look. Does what we just did there make sense to everyone? All right? And I'm not saying this is the problem that you have, but if it's something's not working, always make sure that when you put stuff in, you're saving. Okay? All right. first thing you go with, yeah. Did you want to make your spiel?
Oh, well,
No, that's okay. I'll pause. That's fine.
you're fine, no.
No, that's okay.
Did you say something?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So,
So is everybody caught up to where we were? All right. Does everybody have the CSS up to where we were? All right. And let's face it, there are going to be things that are going to happen in here. I'm proving it to you right now, where you are the best person to debug your code. All right. So again, if we look at where we are right now, and I'll let you catch back up, but again, we've got our background, which was our first component, our logo, which was our second component, our intro, which was our third component, and finally, we've got our countdown, which is our fourth component. I will tell you, just so you know, on the file that I gave you, if yours looks like mine, I did comment out there was a thing in there since it had 2087, it would put the years in there also. So it said like 71 years, comma, etc. I didn't think that was really that relevant, because typically if you're going to be, having a countdown to something, it's either going to be in the current year or in the following year. All right. For instance, let's say that you wanted to go to a concert, and wow, this person's coming in 71 years. That would be kind of silly type of an idea. So I took some change and made some changes to what the person had done. All right. All right. Are you all caught up, Drew? Well, the next thing that we want to care about here are those icons that are going to go down here. All right. So that's the next thing that we care about. All right. I will say right here, again, you may or may not agree with this. There's a lot of space here, and you may say, no, there's not. But remember, we still have stuff we have to put in here. So if we wanted to, we could get rid of some of the space in here, and there's different ways that we can do this. But I want you to understand something, okay? That first of all, on your screen, you may have heard this from me before, you may not have, I don't know. But if we were to draw an axis like you did back in maybe 8th grade when you did that, you had the x-axis and the y-axis type of thing, that point right there where they intersected, that was 0, 0, the origin, correct? When you're working on the web, that's point 0, 0. Just so you know. In the upper left-hand corner, that is point 0, 0. And as you increase x, you're going across. As you increase y, you're going down. But it is also possible to decrease x or decrease y. Have you ever seen a web page where something seems to almost come into the page from outside and kind of just animates its way in? Sometimes when you do that, you've set margin or padding to a negative number, and you have it transition in, or you have it transition up. So the reason I'm telling you that is what I want to do is I want to take the counter that we have here, the 295, etc. stuff, and I want that to be moved up a little bit. Again, there's different ways that we can do this. One of the ways that we can do this for our countdown counter is to come in here and say, whoops, that's not like that, is to come in here and say margin, and hopefully you remember this. If we put in 4 numbers, all right, if we put in 4 numbers, so these aren't the numbers we're going to put in, but if I put in this, 0, 0, 0, 0, those aren't the ones we're going to use. But if we put those in, that says 0 margin, remember, top, right, bottom, left. We want to change the top margin. So I want the top one to be moved up. So I'm going to say negative 15 pixels. Whoops. And I'll leave the rest of them set to 0 like that. All right, even if, just stop typing for a second. Please look up on the screen here. See what it looks like? Now I'm going to refresh. Watch the line, the distance between these two, right here where the mouse is going when I refresh. Okay, it flashed, but it moved up. Okay, that's the idea behind doing that. Again, there are a lot of different ways to do that. I just showed you one of those ways. All right? So we now again have 4 out of our 10 components. And you're like, well, we'll never finish this by 12. Remember, if you look up on the screen here, that our next 4 components are these 4. Right there. So once we do that next row, now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of our 10 components done. All right? So I'll spend the most time talking about Facebook. Because the stuff that we do for Facebook, we're going to do the same stuff for, I guess that's Twitter. The stuff we do for Twitter, we'll do the same stuff for Facebook and for Google, whatever it was, and for Instagram. Okay? And the thing about this, it's interesting because I'm doing this based off of a thing that a class that I took online, and the author was saying, well, and this is the color for Twitter. And I'm like, how did you find that out? So, of course, I Googled. I said, Google Twitter color, and I know it's blue, so I said, Google Twitter blue. And it came up and it gave the number. All right? So, again, basically anything that you want in there, it is out there. All right? So this particular example is going to have a lot more in it. Think about what we're trying to do here. First of all, we want to create 4 of these. All right? Second of all, we want, when each one of them is touched, we want its color to change. And third of all, when the color changes, we want it to bounce a little bit and then bounce down. So we're doing a little bit with effects in here, because this allowed the chance to bring in some of the CSS3 effects that can be used. All right? So I'm going to start by coming in here and again going to my index.html file, and I'll start the same way that I started before. All right? And that is, I'm going to grab all the stuff that we just had for our countdown, all the divs, all of that stuff, just like we just did. Copy it to the clipboard, come in here, and paste it in. And again, remove that line that says div class equal countdown. That makes sense to everybody? All right, hopefully by now that's almost kind of second nature. All right. Now, call it a quiz, call it whatever you want. But when you look at this, in a way, this stuff right here, okay, it's kind of like a menu. When we create a menu, what do we do with the menu to make sure that we get all the stuff lined up? Anybody remember? What do you do with a menu? We put it in a certain kind of tag. What kind of tag do you put a menu in? What's that? Well, it's an unordered list, right? Remember that by default then it's going to list boom, 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 but we can also tell it, instead of listing vertically, to list horizontally. All right? And what's real nice is Bootstrap has a class that does that. All right? So we're going to come back to here. Make sure I'm still taping. Yes, I am. All right. So we're going to come back here, and we're going to start typing in an unordered list. UL, but we want to say class equals list inline. What that means is the stuff that we're going to put in here, it'll automatically put them all on the same line, which is what we want, right? All right. So when you've got that in there, this stuff, you know, a list, an unordered list is made up of list items, right? LIs. So, and when you think about it, we're going to have 4 LIs. Let's not put all 4 in right now. Let's just put in the first one. And we're going to end up making some changes to this after we put it in. All right? So we've got our beginning LI here. And we're going to say class, again, equal list inline item. if you look up on the screen, everything that we have on here that says class equal, that's under a div, those are all bootstrap classes. Does that make sense? So if Eric says after class, I don't understand what the heck he meant by list inline. You go out to getbootstrap.com and you start to look through the classes and you find out the one for unordered lists and list items. And it'll explain the whole thing to you and give you examples. All right. So what we want to do in here, all right, and I'm going to put a few things in that are going to look a little weird for lack of better words. Before I do, let me show you. Remember before when we did this? I'm going to go back to the site I was at before. Font Awesome. And we'll go to Font Awesome icons. All right, hopefully I can do a little better job of searching than I did previously. Notice there's even a Font Awesome cheat sheet out here. I don't know if I've got a lot of stuff open, but that's taken way, way, way too long to open. I don't know, almost everything I have here is cancel. Almost everything that I have here is closed, but it's still taking a long, long time for stuff to happen. That's still, and I'm getting this all the time too. Yeah, if I didn't tell you this before, we don't have internet here technically. What happens is we get the internet bounced here from St. Louis. So anytime St. Louis has any kind of problems, we experience the same kind of problem. All right. So if that happens, you know, you might want to refresh or try it again. But again, I'm going to go to icons here, and I'm going to try to see if I can do a search now. Search icons, and I'm going to look for Twitter. Okay. That's fantastic. All right. Well, what's supposed to end up happening, I guess it did. There's our results. So I can get Twitter that looks like this, and I can get Twitter that looks like this. I'm going to grab the one that's Twitter Square if you look at it. And it says, here it is. Please look up on the screen here. I know that's kind of hard to read, so you might have to go out to Font Awesome yourself. It says if you want to add a Twitter icon, that's what you do. All right, that's what you have to add, all right, onto your code. And I'll add it, but if you can't read it, you will in just a second, okay? So in here, what I want to put is, and I'll move this down so you can see it. It's in an I tag, I for, again, italicized, and it's got class equal, all right? And it says FA stands for Font Awesome. Makes sense? So Font Awesome Twitter Square, and the hidden equal true, that ARIA says that if you've got anybody who's doing this who is blind, the size of that you make these things isn't going to matter because they can't see it anyway. So they're basically saying, for lack of better words, hide them. So you're trying to not screw up screen readers, for lack of better words. Please look up on the screen right now, even if you're still typing. And you say, no, it's not there. It is there. It's right there, and it's almost, you almost can't see it. But it's right there, right where I've got the mouse. The problem is, it is there. Like I said, you may have to look for it. You got to make it bigger, and you're going to have to center it. Okay? Just as we've been doing. So the first thing that we want to do is if we look at these icons, if we look at them, All right? There are different ways when you do this that you can do this, and you can look at the different sizes. I'm trying to remember what that was, but it's in here someplace. There it is. This is the size ours is right now. That's the default size, which is not very big. I can make it up to 5 times that size. Well, that's probably going to be too big. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it 3 times that size. And in order to make it 3 times that size, I have to add another class that's called FA3X. All right, so what does that mean? That means if you go back to here, I have to add one more class here. So class equals, we've got FA for font awesome, FA Twitter square, and then we have to also add FA-3X. Now let's make sure it worked. Can you see it now? Right there. Again, it's real hard to see because we have to change the color. But there it is, 3 times the size it was before. All right, and if you can't see it, hopefully on your screen, you'll be able to. So you need to put in all of this. And now we've got good news, because what we want to do is we want to copy this 3 times, correct? This is our Twitter one. We're going to add a Facebook one. We're going to add one for Google Plus, and we're going to add one for Instagram, okay? So I'm going to grab this stuff that I've got right here that I just put in. I'm going to highlight all of this. All 4 of those lines. I'm going to copy it to the clipboard, then I'm going to paste once, and instead of Twitter square, I want this one to say Facebook square. All right? And that should be good for that one, so let's look. There's Twitter, and there's Facebook. Hopefully you can see them. They're kind of rounding into view. We're going to fix that in just a second. So I've got those 2 done. All right. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to copy it yet again. And this one will be called Google Square. So I've got 3 of them now. I thought it was called Google Square. Maybe I'm wrong. It's Google Plus Square. I'm sorry. So not Google Square, Google Plus Square. All right, and I'll give you time to look at all this, so hold on. So there's those 3, and then finally I want to add the last one. So I'm going to copy it in here one more time. But this one is just called Instagram. It's not Instagram Square, it's just Instagram. So let's see if all of those worked. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 different icons. Right there. So I'll put this back up there and I'll give you about 5 minutes or so. Can everybody read all that okay? I know it's a little blurry down here, but it's the same thing 4 times. The first one should say FA-Twitter-square. The second one FA-Facebook-square. The third one FA-Google-plus-square. And the fourth one FA-Instagram. Other than that, they're all the same. And again, if you do that and all 4 of yours are showing, but they're really ugly right now, that's where you should be. All right? It's just showing the default icons. We're going to change that in just a minute. We're going to change that by working with the CSS. But before we do that, there's one more thing that we have to do. Would you agree? You don't have to look up here, but please listen. Would everybody in here agree that the color of each one of these icons is a little bit different? Would you agree with that? We don't want them all to be the same color blue or the same color green or the same color red or whatever. So we want to handle each one of these differently. Does that make sense to everyone? So if you look up on the screen here, everybody, we have to add one more class. We're going to make our own class. We're going to make one that's called Twitter. We're going to make another one that's going to be called Facebook. We're going to make another one that's going to we'll call it Google instead of Google Plus, not Google. And we'll make one more that we'll call Instagram. These classes, this one, this one, this one, and this one, they don't exist right now. Does that make sense to everyone? That's going to be our individual thing that we put in. Make sure you save before you go and run it to make sure everything looks okay and you haven't broke anything. Then again, if you do a run, bring it up in your browser of choice, you should see the 4 icons right there. Again, we're going to start changing this in just a second. If you all look up on the screen here, I want you to understand we're actually adding here a class called FA, which stands for Font Awesome. We're also adding a class here that's called FA Twitter Square. That's 2 classes. We're also adding a class that's called FA-3X, so that's 3 classes. We're also adding our own class, which we're about to create, called Twitter. We're adding 4 classes in here. Each one of these has 4 classes. 3 of the classes are almost the same other than the name here. But each one of these is totally going to be different. Even though they're going to look the same, they're all going to have different colors. All right? The first thing is, would everybody agree that we want these icons to be centered? Does that make sense? That's the first thing we want to do. Well, all of these icons, all 4 of these icons that we've got here, all 4 of them are under an ID called icons, correct? So the first thing we want to do is go back to our style sheet. I'm going to bring that up a little. And we're going to say pound icons. Now, somebody tell me, how do you center? This is considered text. How do you center text on the page? Text align. Text dash align colon center. And again, I can make that one change. I can go back to my HTML and I can run it. And now, again, it's hard to see, but now these 4 icons are all centered. All right? So now what I want to do is I want to go in and I want to start working with the individual icons. All right? And I want the color of all of those icons to be white initially. I want the color of all of them, the background color at least, to be white, because it'll make it easier for us to see it. Okay? And we'll do a few other things. So let's come in here, and remember, what we want to do now is we want to say pound icons, and FA, that's one of our classes. Since it's a class, it's .fa, not far left. .fa. Let me hit enter a few more times here and move that up. There we go. All right. So for each one of these, we want the color to be white. We're going to put some margin in there. So we'll have some margin. We'll have 5px and 15px. You should all understand this now. Please look on the screen. Everybody should get under that margin. That means 5 pixels top and bottom, 15 pixels left and right. That should make sense to all of you by now, because there's 2 numbers. So it says apply the first number to the top and bottom, apply the second number to the left and right. All right? Now, you don't have to do this yet because we're going to add more stuff, but notice with just those 2 changes, if I bring it up again, I don't want to run my CSS file. Now you should see your icons. See that? And they're spaced a little bit. All right? But what we want to do, though, So that's pretty good. Is we're going to want to work with these so that when we highlight them, they bounce up a little bit on the screen. And we want them to look correct when they bounce. In other words, we don't want this to bounce so high that it bounces up into here, or bounce so low that they're not even or whatever. So we're going to put a couple more things in here. We're going to tell the position, we want that to be relative. All right, we want there to be no bottom, basically, margin. So we're just going to say 0. And this is the first one. If you look up on the screen here, we're going to put in here, this is the CSS3 thing. We're going to tell it to transition. All right? And we want everything on there to transition. The next thing we put in here is 0.2 S. We want it to all happen over 0.2 of a second. And then ease in, out. Now, I'm going to take for granted that none of that makes sense to you. All right? I'm going to take for granted that this makes no sense to you. So please look up on the screen. Notice now that, well, I guess nothing's happened yet because we're going to have to do a little bit more transitioning. But what's going to happen is when we put our mouse on it, it's going to bounce a little bit. All right? But what the other thing that we want to have happen is every single time that we come in here and we put our mouse over one of these, we want it to change to its color. So when we put our mouse over Google+, that's red by default. We want that to turn red. Does that make sense? And then when we take our mouse out, we want it to not be red anymore. So we're going to do another effect. All right? So we're going to do this. We're going to have 4 of these. We're going to put in pound icons dot Twitter colon hover. And again, what that means is when we are literally hovering over that Twitter icon, we want its color to change to pound 6 CADDE. And no one's asked, but just so you know, when you put in these colors like this, it doesn't matter if you put them in an uppercase or lowercase. It does not matter. So if you're more comfortable making the CADDE all uppercase, then do that. It really doesn't matter. And we want that bottom 5 pixels again. All right, please look up on the screen. So notice now, can you see that? See how it's bouncing and it's blue? Everybody see that? Blue and bouncing. So what we want to do next is we want to copy this 3 times. Why? Because we're going to have, next we're going to have, instead of for Twitter, we want one for Facebook. And we want to make sure that for Facebook, we change that color because it's not the same color here. So we want to change the color to pound 3B5998. Then we want another one. And this one, instead of Facebook, this will be called Google. And that color is EA4335. And then finally, we'll want one more. And I'll move this up so you're all able to see it. And this will be called Instagram. And that color will be 517 FA6. All right, I'm going to come right back to this, but please look up on the screen right now. Everybody see what we have? How they're all moving now, and they all have the colors when we mouse over, and the color goes away when we mouse out. So let me give you a couple minutes because we're now done with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tenths of what we have to do. So we're 80% done. All right? So here is the CSS for that. And I'll leave the Twitter hover and the Facebook hover up there for a minute, and then I'll slide down so you can see the rest of them. For those of you who might say to me, you know, Jeff, I'm sorry, but I'm really, really a slow typer, get faster. You know, you can go online. Mavis Beacon is got really good typing tutorials, and I believe they're free. But if you Google free typing tutorials, it'll be like learning piano or guitar or anything else. You'll start off real slow, all right, but you'll learn how to type faster. If you're a hunt and pecker that does it with 2 fingers, you really should learn not to do that. Does everybody have the first one in the Twitter hover? Yes? So I'll move that up then to the next one. So there's the Facebook. Hopefully now you can read all of them okay there, that none of them are really that out of focus.
I have a question.
Yes.
Facebook, icon,
Facebook one doesn't change? Okay, let's go back. Let's look first at your CSS. And where's the one that says Facebook cover? That one looks fine, so let's go back to the page over here. And let's see, Twitter, Facebook's there, even spelled out Facebook there, see that? I mean, that's real common, and we all do it. Okay. Anybody else who's trying to do this and for some reason something's not working? Because I'd like us all to finish this. If we get done early, that's great, because we'll need at least a half an hour at the end for the last part of it. Okay, let's look at your CSS. Where's the last spell? That's not gonna change anything. Save that. Let's, for right now, maximize this on the screen so we can see it. Before the dash, not an equals. You have to change that one up there too. With my error, why don't you go back up and see if you did anything else? There. Save. Do a run, Oh, no. You're only supposed to have. Leave, let me go check here. If you look, Dominic, here on the screen, where my ULs are, see that? There's a UL right there. There's only one UL here, and then a bottom one. And all the LIs that are inside, all those ULs and LIs, you got to get rid of all of them. That's putting them all on a separate line. You only want one UL at the beginning, and then your ending UL at the end. Just less than sign here. That's good. That's good. Get rid of that line here that says UL. Get rid of that whole line. Okay, get rid of that whole line. It's not that. Get rid of that one. It's not that.
Anybody else who's having any problems getting anything at all to show on your screen or it's showing wrong? Okay, so like I said, ideally at least, now everyone has it, when you run it, it's now looking like this. So we now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of our 10 components. Do you want to finish it up or do you want another break?
Another break.
All right, okay. I mean, it's spoken. All right, it is 10:06. Let's keep it about 10 minutes. We'll start up around 10:16.